It was one of those ordinary afternoons that didn't seem like anything special. The sun was bright, the mall was crowded, and everyone was just busy living their own small stories. The man walked into the store quietly, blending in like any other shopper. He had just finished a long day at work and thought he'd pick up a small gift for his nephew before heading home. Something simple. Maybe a pair of sneakers or a shirt with a cartoon print. He was an FBI agent, though no one around him could have guessed it. He wasn't wearing anything that screamed authority. No badge showing, no gun visible, no fancy suit. Just jeans, a plain jacket, and that calm, steady walk that came naturally to him after years of training. He didn't like to draw attention, especially when he was off duty. This was supposed to be a short, peaceful stop before heading back home to unwind. The store was buzzing with background music and soft chatter. A few teenagers were trying on jackets. An older woman was arguing over a discount, and two employees near the counter were gossiping in low voices. The agent smiled politely at one of them as he passed, then moved to the accessories section. He picked up a few items, checked their prices, and placed them back neatly. He was careful about everything he touched, an old habit. As he turned toward the sunglasses rack, he noticed a small pair that caught his eye. His nephew had been talking about wanting a pair, just like the ones secret agents wear. That made him laugh silently. He picked up the sunglasses, examined them, and thought they'd make a good gift. He decided to hold on to them while he looked around for something else. He didn't know that from behind the counter, one of the employees had started watching him closely. She nudged her coworker and whispered, "That guy's acting weird. He's been standing there too long." Her coworker shrugged but kept looking. Sometimes they joked around trying to spot shoplifters, but today, they took it too seriously. The agent, unaware of the whispers, walked to another section of the store. He noticed a small child crying near the shoes and helped the boy pick up a toy that had fallen. It was nothing, just a small act of kindness, but a security guard across the room saw it differently. To him, it looked like the man had bent down and quickly put something in his jacket pocket. The misunderstanding began right there. A few minutes later, the agent made his way to the checkout counter with the sunglasses still in hand. He reached into his wallet for his credit card. But before he could even greet the cashier, a hand rested firmly on his shoulder. "Sir, can you step aside for a moment?" a deep voice said. The agent turned around calmly and saw the store's security guard standing behind him, face serious and posture stiff. The guard looked nervous but determined. "Is there a problem?" the agent asked, polite but slightly confused. "Yes," the guard replied. "You've been seen taking store property and placing it in your pocket. I'm going to have to ask you to empty your jacket." The air around them shifted immediately. Shoppers turned their heads. The employees froze. Someone even whispered he was stealing. The agent blinked, taken aback by the accusation. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said in his even tone. "I haven't taken anything that isn't paid for. You can check the cameras if you like." The guard, perhaps feeling the pressure of the onlookers, crossed his arms. "Sir, please step to the side. We've already contacted the police." That caught the agent off guard. "You called the police?" he asked, eyebrows slightly raised. He tried to stay calm, but there was frustration behind his composed expression. He was an FBI agent, used to seeing situations spiral out of control quickly, and he knew that one wrong word could make things worse. Within minutes, the sound of police sirens echoed faintly from outside. Two officers entered the store, guided by the manager who pointed straight toward the agent. "That's him," the manager said loudly, eager to look in charge. The officer in front walked up. "Sir, we've had a report of possible shoplifting. Can we see some identification?" The agent took a slow breath. "Of course," he said, pulling out his wallet and showing his FBI badge. The silver glint caught the light, and the entire atmosphere changed instantly. The store employees exchanged stunned looks. The guard's mouth opened slightly, then closed again, unsure what to say. "Sir, you're with the bureau?" one officer asked, now visibly unsure how to proceed. "Yes," the agent replied calmly. "And I assure you I didn't steal anything. I came in here to buy a gift. You can check the cameras. I'm perfectly fine waiting until you do." The officers stepped aside for a moment to talk quietly. The store manager, still defensive, insisted they follow through with the report. "Badge or not, we all have to follow the law," she said, her tone sharp but trembling slightly. The agent stood quietly, his hands visible, his body language open. He knew how situations like this could spiral, how quickly people could draw conclusions. He'd seen it happen to others. Now it was happening to him. One officer finally turned back to him. "Sir, just to be thorough, would you mind if we take a quick look inside your jacket pockets?" The agent nodded. "Go ahead," he said softly. He had nothing to hide. The officer carefully checked, pulling out a few small personal items: a wallet, car keys, a pen, and a folded receipt from a gas station. Then he reached into the side pocket and paused. His fingers touched something metallic. He pulled it out slowly. It wasn't a store item. It wasn't even sunglasses. It looked like a small round device no bigger than a coin with a blinking red light. Everyone stared at it, puzzled. The manager frowned. "That's not from this store," she said immediately. The agent's expression shifted slightly, the calmness in his eyes giving way to something more alert. "Where did that come from?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. He didn't recognize the object at all. The officers exchanged looks. One of them asked, "You sure you didn't have this earlier, sir?" "I'm sure," the agent replied firmly. "I have never seen it before." The crowd had grown larger by now. Some people whispered that it looked like a tracker. Others thought it was a gadget or maybe something dangerous. The air felt tense again, but this time for different reasons. The senior officer cleared his throat. "Let's take this outside." "Too many people here," he said. The agent nodded and followed them calmly. He could feel every pair of eyes watching him, phones recording as he walked past. It wasn't the kind of attention he ever wanted. He had always believed in doing his job quietly behind the scenes. But now, he was the center of a scene he didn't create. Outside, the officers asked him to explain everything from the beginning. He told them exactly what had happened, where he came from, what he picked up, how the accusation started. He didn't raise his voice once. When he mentioned that he worked in the Bureau's cybersecurity division, one of the officers seemed to tense up. "Cybersecurity, huh?" he said. "Then you've seen things like this before?" "Similar," the agent admitted, glancing at the small blinking device. "But not in my pocket." For a moment, everyone was silent. The officer held the small device carefully in a plastic bag, his brows furrowed. "We'll need to take this in for examination," he said. "That's fine," the agent replied. "I'd like to know what it is, too." As they talked, the store manager walked outside looking flustered. I'm sorry if there's been a mistake," she said awkwardly. "We were just doing our job." The agent nodded politely. "I understand. But next time it might help to check the footage before calling the police." She looked embarrassed and mumbled something under her breath. The officers decided not to detain the agent, especially after verifying his credentials. They assured him the situation would be reviewed thoroughly. But the tension still lingered in the air. As the police car drove away with the strange device sealed in an evidence bag, the agent stood there for a long moment, looking at the reflection in the store window. For the first time in a long while, he felt what it was like to be on the other side of suspicion. He finally turned and walked toward the parking lot, replaying every second in his mind. Something about that blinking device bothered him deeply. He knew enough about surveillance tools to recognize a tracker when he saw one. And if that thing had been in his pocket, it meant someone had planted it there. He didn't know who. He didn't know when. But he knew one thing for sure. The accusation that embarrassed him today wasn't random. It was part of something else. Something that was only just beginning. He started his car, took a slow breath, and drove off quietly. Behind him, the mall lights flickered as the evening settled in. The whole day had started with a simple errand, but by the time he drove away, he could feel the weight of something bigger forming, a story that was far from over. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. Sleep hadn't come easy after what had happened. The memory of standing in that store, surrounded by strangers staring at him like a criminal, kept replaying in his mind. Even after years of handling tough investigations, this one simple incident had shaken something inside him. It wasn't the accusation itself, it was the feeling of being powerless when you knew the truth but no one else did. He sat at the edge of his bed, running his hand over his face. On the table beside him was his phone, buzzing softly with new messages. A few of his colleagues had already heard what had happened. Somehow news spread fast. Even small misunderstandings became stories overnight. One message said, "You okay, man? Saw a post about you being detained." Another read, "Don't worry, we know it's nonsense. Just stay calm." He sighed and replied briefly, telling them he was fine. Then he put the phone down and stared at the ceiling for a while, thinking about that blinking device. It hadn't left his mind since the officer pulled it from his pocket. He could still see that tiny red light blinking like it was alive. It didn't belong to the store, and it definitely didn't belong to him, which meant someone had put it there, someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Later that morning, he drove to the local police station. He wanted to check if there were any updates about the object they'd found. When he arrived, one of the officers from the previous night recognized him immediately and came over. "Glad you came by," the officer said. "We were just about to contact you. That thing we found, it's strange." The agent nodded slightly. "What did you find out?" "Well," the officer said, lowering his voice, "it's not a regular tracker. It's a custom-built device, not something you can just buy from a store. We couldn't identify who made it, so we've sent it over to your bureau's tech division for analysis." That confirmed what he already suspected. It wasn't just some prank or accident. Whoever planted it wanted to keep an eye on him, and possibly to get him in trouble while doing it. He thanked the officer and asked if he could review the security footage from the store. The officer agreed, saying the footage was ready to be viewed. They went into a small room filled with monitors and computers. The video started playing, showing the store from different camera angles. Everything looked ordinary at first. He could see himself walking in, moving around the aisles, and eventually picking up the sunglasses. Nothing strange. But then as he moved toward the shoe section, another man passed very close behind him, so close their shoulders brushed for a moment. The agent leaned forward. "Pause right there," he said. The officer stopped the footage. The man's face wasn't clear, but his build looked familiar. He was wearing a dark cap and a jacket that made him blend in easily. "Zoom in," the agent said quietly. The image got blurry, but he could make out the moment the man's hand moved slightly near his jacket pocket. Just one quick motion, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. "There," the agent pointed. "That's when it was planted." The officer frowned. "You sure? That's just a split second." "I'm sure," he replied firmly. "That's no accident." The officer leaned back, shaking his head. "So someone planted that thing on you in public, knowing you'd be accused?" "That's cold." The agent didn't answer right away. He was thinking. It wasn't just cold, it was planned, deliberate, and whoever did it wasn't just trying to follow him. They wanted him to be humiliated, questioned, maybe even arrested. Someone wanted to make him look guilty of something. He left the station and drove straight to the bureau's field office. He walked through the familiar glass doors, greeted by nods from other agents. One of them, a close colleague, pulled him aside. "Heard what happened?" she said quietly. "You okay?" "I will be," he replied. "I just need to find out who's behind it." They went into a private room where a technician from the cyber division was already waiting. On the table lay the small device inside a clear evidence bag. The technician gestured toward it. "This thing's interesting," he said. "It's a GPS tracker, but not a commercial one. It's been modified with encrypted frequency hopping. It can avoid most detection tools. Whoever built it knew what they were doing." The agent folded his arms, thinking deeply. "Can we trace where it's transmitting from?" "Already tried," the technician said. "It stopped transmitting right after it was collected by police. Whoever was monitoring it must have realized it was discovered." That made sense. Whoever was behind this was watching closely. They probably saw the news or social media videos from the store and realized the plan had gone sideways. The tracker had done its job. It got him into trouble, but now they were covering their tracks. "Any chance of getting a serial or a part's origin?" The agent asked. "Working on it," the technician said. "But I did find something odd. A small engraving on the inner chip. It's like a manufacturer's code, but it's not standard. We've seen something similar once before, on devices used by a smuggling ring we investigated last year." The agent's heart sank slightly. That case had been his. He remembered how it ended, with several arrests, but one key suspect had managed to escape before they could catch him. That suspect had vowed to ruin him, shouting it during a confrontation that went wrong. Could it be connected? He took a deep breath and said, "Keep analyzing it. I'll check our old files." For the rest of the day, he went through case reports, names, photographs, anything that could connect the dots. Hours passed, but the pieces were starting to align in his mind. The person who planted that tracker wanted revenge. And what better way to hurt an FBI agent than to destroy his credibility? If the story had gone differently, If he hadn't kept calm, if the police had arrested him, it would have spread everywhere. FBI agent caught shoplifting. His career would have been over. That night, as he drove home, his mind was still racing. The city lights passed by in a blur. Every sound, every shadow felt sharper than usual. He kept thinking about how easily anyone could be framed, how quickly a crowd could believe the wrong story. He had seen it happen to others, but now he'd lived it himself. When he reached home, he parked outside his apartment building and sat in the car for a few minutes, just breathing. He looked around, scanning the area, a habit he'd developed over years of field work. Everything seemed normal, until a small reflection caught his eye. It came from across the street, where a car was parked facing his building. He squinted and noticed a faint glow from behind the windshield. It looked like a phone screen. He didn't move right away. Instead, he waited, pretending to check his own phone. After a minute or two, the glow disappeared and the car started up quietly and drove away. He watched the taillights fade into the distance. He went inside, but that moment stayed with him. He knew what he'd seen. Someone was watching. It wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. The kind of feeling you get after years of tracking people who didn't want to be caught. The next day, he met again with the local police officers. They had something new to show him. "We found more footage from a camera outside the mall," one officer said. "It shows the same man you pointed out on the store tape." After leaving, he got into a black sedan. "We're checking the plate now." They played the footage. It showed the man removing his cap, revealing a face the agent immediately recognized. It was the same suspect who had escaped during his old case. The anger that hit him wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, the kind that comes when you realize someone has been watching you for a long time. So it was true. This wasn't random. It was personal. "Do you want us to bring him in?" the officer asked. "Not yet," the agent replied. "If we rush it, he'll disappear again. Let's do it right this time." He knew this was more than about clearing his name now. It was about uncovering who else might be behind it. A man like that rarely worked alone. Later that evening, as he walked through the quiet hallways of the bureau office, he passed a mirror and caught his reflection. For a second, he barely recognized the man staring back at him. He looked calm on the outside, but there was a storm underneath. It wasn't anger, it was resolve. He'd been embarrassed, accused, doubted, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was finding the truth and setting things right. Before leaving, he stopped by the tech lab once more. The technician handed him a small report. "We cracked part of the chip's code," he said. "It links to a private communication channel we've seen before. It's used by a group trying to intercept bureau intel. This could go deeper than just a grudge." The agent looked at the paper for a long moment. "Then we'll go deeper too," he said quietly. As he stepped out into the cool night air, he looked up at the sky. It was quiet, but he knew that silence could be deceiving. Somewhere out there, the person who started this was still watching, still waiting. He got into his car, started the engine, and drove off, the sound fading into the night. He didn't know how the next few days would unfold, but one thing was certain. He was done being the target. From this point on, he was going to find the truth no matter how many layers it was buried under. For the next few days, he barely went home. His office light stayed on late into the night, long after most of the building had gone quiet. The case that had started as a misunderstanding in a clothing store was now something much bigger. He could feel it. It wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about uncovering who had planned it and why. He sat at his desk, staring at the blurry printout of the suspect's photo from the mall footage. The man's face was half turned, but he recognized the posture, the way he carried himself. Years ago, they had crossed paths during an investigation that involved stolen government equipment. That case had ended with several arrests, but one person slipped through. This man. And now he was back, smarter and bolder. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became that this wasn't just an act of revenge. Planting a tracker, waiting for it to be discovered, and then timing a public accusation, it all took coordination. Someone had to know his routine, his habits, even where he liked to shop after work. That kind of detail didn't come from guesswork. He pulled out his phone and called the bureau's tech lab. "Any updates on the tracker's code?" he asked. "We've cracked a bit more," the technician replied. "It looks like it was transmitting to a secure satellite relay that hides the original location. But get this, it was only active for about 6 hours before it was shut down." "So someone knew when it got discovered," he said, thinking aloud. They must have been watching. Exactly, the technician said. We think they were nearby, maybe even inside the mall. That detail hit him hard. The idea that someone could have been watching from the crowd, blending in, pretending to be just another shopper. It made his skin crawl. He had been trained to notice people watching him, but that day he hadn't felt a thing. Whoever did this was skilled. He hung up and leaned back in his chair. His mind began connecting the dots again. The tracker, the suspect, the timing, all of it pointed to a deeper plan, one that might not have been just personal revenge. Maybe they were trying to get access to bureau data. Maybe they wanted him distracted, discredited, and pulled off active duty so no one would notice what they were doing behind the scenes. He stood up and walked over to the window. The city light stretched out far below, glowing softly against the dark sky. It looked peaceful, but he knew better. Peace was an illusion. It only lasted until someone decided to disturb it. The next morning, he drove to the local police station again to meet with the officer who had helped him before. The officer looked tired, but there was a spark of interest in his eyes when the agent arrived. We found something new, the officer said. That car the suspect used. It's registered under a fake name, but the address links to a warehouse outside the city. They decided to check it out together. It was better to move quietly. No sirens, no backup yet, just observation. They wanted to see who came in and out before taking any action. When they reached the area, the warehouse looked abandoned from the outside. Rusted doors, cracked windows, weeds growing through the pavement. But as they parked a short distance away, the agent noticed something off. There was a small camera mounted near the gate, clean and new, blinking faintly. He pointed it out to the officer. That's active surveillance, he said. No one leaves that on in an empty building. They stayed in the car for hours, watching. A few trucks came and went, all unmarked. Men got out, loaded boxes, and left without saying much. Every move looked efficient, practiced. This wasn't random activity, it was organized. By evening, they decided to pull back. It wasn't the right time to confront them, not without a warrant or backup. But now they had a lead, something solid to build on. Back at the bureau, he filed a report, carefully detailing what they had seen. He knew the wheels of procedure turned slowly, but this couldn't wait too long. If those people realized they were being watched, they'd disappear again. That night, as he left the office, he felt a strange sense of alertness. The parking lot was mostly empty. The sound of his shoes echoed softly on the pavement. He unlocked his car and paused for a second before getting in. Something in his gut told him to check. He crouched slightly and looked under the vehicle. There it was. Another small blinking device, just like the first one. He froze for a moment, staring at it. This one wasn't hidden as carefully. It was stuck near the rear bumper with a magnet. He took a photo of it, then carefully removed it using gloves. He could feel his pulse quickening. Someone had been tracking him again. That confirmed it. Whoever was behind this wasn't done. He drove back to the bureau immediately, his mind racing. The tech team examined the second tracker and found it had gone offline the moment he removed it. They're monitoring you in real time, one of the analysts said. You're being watched, maybe even followed. He didn't let the fear show, but inside the thought bothered him deeply. Whoever was doing this was close, too close. And if they knew where he lived, where he worked, and where he went, then they probably knew more than that. Later, sitting in his quiet apartment, he looked around the room. The silence felt heavier now. He picked up his phone and checked the call logs, then went through the security app linked to his door camera. Everything looked normal, but that didn't calm him. He knew better than to trust what looked normal. Around midnight, his phone buzzed. It was the same police officer. We got movement, the voice said. The warehouse you checked earlier, one of the trucks left an hour ago. It's heading toward your side of town. He stood up instantly. Did you track it? Yes, but we lost visual near the river. It might be nothing, but I thought you should know. Thanks, the agent said and hung up. He looked out the window again. The streets were quiet, but somewhere out there someone was moving against him, maybe even getting ready for another setup. He couldn't afford to let that happen. The next morning he met with his bureau director and briefed him on everything. The planted devices, the suspect, the surveillance. The director listened carefully and then said, You're too close to this. We'll assign others to follow up. With respect, the agent replied, that's exactly what they want. If I step back now, we lose the trail. They think I'm distracted, let's use that. The director studied him for a moment before nodding slowly. "All right. But you're not working alone. We'll assign support." He appreciated that. For the first time in days, he felt like he wasn't carrying this weight alone. The Bureau set up discreet surveillance on his car and home, not to watch him but to catch whoever was watching him. It was a strange feeling being both the hunter and the bait. For a few days, nothing happened. Everything went quiet, almost too quiet. Then, one afternoon, while reviewing files in his office, his phone vibrated with a notification from the surveillance team. A vehicle had been spotted circling near his building 3 times in the past hour. The plate matched the same black sedan from the mall footage. He rushed outside and got into a nearby Bureau vehicle. Following at a distance, he tailed the sedan through narrow streets until it finally stopped behind a deserted parking lot. He parked far enough not to be noticed and waited. The driver got out. It was the same man, the suspect from the footage. He was carrying a small briefcase and looking around nervously. The agent's instinct told him not to approach yet. He grabbed his camera and took several photos instead. Then he noticed something. The man wasn't alone. Another figure stepped out from the shadows, handing him an envelope. The exchange was quick. Then both men went in separate directions. He followed the second man discreetly until he entered an office building downtown. He made a note of the address and quietly returned to his car. Every move, every detail was proof that this went beyond one person. It was a network, organized, hidden, and watching people who got too close. That night, back at headquarters, he laid out all the photos, the notes, the maps. The second man's face was clearer, and after running it through the database, a match appeared. A contractor once linked to classified government projects. Someone who had access to technology that could build those tracking devices. The truth was beginning to unfold, piece by piece. The tracker wasn't just meant to follow him. It was a test, a signal, a way to see how much the Bureau would notice. Someone was probing their system from the outside, and he had been used as bait to measure their response. As he realized that, the weight of it sank in. The incident that started with an accusation in a store wasn't just about him. It was about something bigger, something that reached into places he hadn't even looked yet. He turned off the office lights and stood by the window looking out at the city again. This time he didn't feel powerless. He felt focused. The people who had tried to frame him thought they could turn him into a distraction. But they had made a mistake. They had woken up the one person who wouldn't stop until the truth was exposed. He picked up his jacket, the same one that had once held that tiny blinking tracker, and whispered to himself, "Let's see who's really watching who." Then he walked out into the night ready for whatever came next. The next few hours after that shocking discovery felt like a blur for everyone in the store. What had started as a routine shoplifting call had now turned into something none of them were prepared for. The small tracking device found in the agent's jacket pocket changed everything. The local officers stood silently near the counter, trying to understand how something like this even got there. The store manager, who earlier had been confident and loud in his accusations, now stood frozen, his face pale and his voice gone quiet. The agent remained calm, though his mind was racing. He had handled countless investigations in his career, but never had he imagined becoming part of one in this way. He carefully examined the small metallic object sitting on the counter under a clear plastic evidence bag. It looked like a regular GPS tracker, the kind used by private investigators or criminals trying to follow someone's movements. But to him, it wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a sign that someone had been watching him for a while. He asked to make a call, and after a brief discussion, one of the senior officers allowed it. He stepped aside, pulled out his phone, and contacted his field office. His voice was steady but low, explaining every detail of what happened and requesting immediate technical support. He told them about the tracker and asked them to send a specialized team to handle it properly. Within 30 minutes, 2 men in dark suits arrived at the store. They were from the FBI's local field unit and recognized the agent right away. The officers moved aside to give them space, realizing the matter had officially gone beyond their level. The agent quietly greeted them, and the 3 spoke in low tones. One of them examined the tracker with a small device, scanning it for serial numbers and signal frequency. The reading confirmed what the agent suspected. The device had been active for several days. Someone had indeed been tracking his movements. The store's security team, now completely cooperative, pulled up their CCTV footage. Everyone gathered around the monitor as the video played back from earlier that afternoon. It showed the agent walking in calmly, looking at shirts and sunglasses, nothing unusual at all. Then, just as he stopped near one of the displays, another man walked past him. Tall, wearing a cap pulled low over his face. The man brushed against the agent's shoulder for barely a second, then continued toward the exit. The room went silent as the frame froze at that moment. The man's movement looked too casual, too smooth, as if done with intent. The agent's jaw tightened. He didn't recognize the man right away, but the gesture seemed planned. He turned to the officers and said firmly, "That's when it happened. That's when he slipped it in." The police officer who had searched him earlier now looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Sir, I'm sorry," he said quietly. The agent nodded slightly, his tone calm. "You did your job. Now let's find out who this person is." The FBI technicians made a copy of the footage and started tracking the device's signal. They traced it back to a relay point outside the mall parking lot. It had transmitted data to a location miles away, suggesting whoever planted it wasn't working alone. The store, which had been full of shoppers only hours ago, now felt heavy with tension and curiosity. Employees whispered to one another, unsure whether to feel guilty, relieved, or scared. By evening, the agent returned to his car, still parked in the same spot. His phone rang again. It was his supervisor. The voice on the other end told him the tracker matched a series of similar devices found in past cases, linked to a criminal group under federal investigation. That case, as fate would have it, had been one the agent himself worked on months earlier. The connection hit him immediately. During that case, the FBI had dismantled a ring involved in illegal tracking, surveillance, and theft. Many were caught, but a few had escaped. One in particular, a man who once cooperated as an informant before turning against them, had vanished without a trace. The same man had blamed the FBI for betraying him. Now it seemed he was back. The agent's expression hardened. It was clear the setup wasn't random. The plan had been to humiliate him publicly, make him appear corrupt or unstable, and shake the agency's credibility. Whoever planted that tracker knew his routine, knew where he shopped, and counted on him being alone that day. He met with the local police again the next morning to continue piecing everything together. The officers treated him with visible respect now. They apologized for the earlier misunderstanding, and he accepted it with grace. "We all want the same thing," he told them. The truth. The investigation grew quickly. The FBI obtained permission to track down the signal's full path. Their cyber team located the origin. It led to a small rental unit on the outskirts of town. Agents moved in quietly and found computers, transmitters, and multiple identical tracking devices. On one desk lay printed photos of several FBI agents, including the one who had been falsely accused in the store. Inside the unit, fingerprints and surveillance footage pointed to a familiar face, the missing informant from the earlier case. The man had been using fake IDs and moving frequently, staying one step ahead. But this time he had made a mistake by going public. When the news reached the agent, he wasn't surprised. "He's been watching for a while," he said, more to himself than anyone else. He wanted to make it personal. For days, the story quietly unfolded behind the scenes. The store's staff agreed to cooperate fully, handing over all video recordings. The officers who were there during the search also gave statements, admitting that the situation had escalated quickly and unfairly. Their honesty helped clear the air. Meanwhile, the FBI launched a broader manhunt for the informant. Every new clue added to the bigger picture. The tracker, it turned out, had been sending data not only to one location, but to multiple encrypted receivers. The goal wasn't just to follow the agent. It was to gather enough data to predict his movements, find weak moments, and strike at the agency's credibility. One evening, as the agent sat in his small office reviewing the files, his phone buzzed. It was a message from a colleague. They had spotted the suspect's car near the city border. The agent didn't go with the team that night. His role now was coordination, not direct pursuit, but he watched the updates come in minute by minute. By early morning, the suspect had been captured. He didn't resist. During questioning, he admitted to planting the tracker in the store and framing the agent. He said he wanted revenge for what he called a ruined life, blaming the FBI for exposing his crimes years ago. He thought if he could embarrass one of their own publicly, it would damage their image. The confession brought a strange mix of relief and sadness. The agent couldn't help but feel pity for the man who had fallen so far. But he also knew that justice had to take its course. The truth finally was out. When the agent returned to the police station that week, the officers greeted him warmly. The same officer who had searched him approached and said, "You handled it better than any of us could have. We learned something important from that day." The agent simply smiled and replied, "We all did." Later, the police department released a statement to clear his name officially. It explained how the situation had unfolded, how the misunderstanding had been corrected, and how both local and federal teams worked together to uncover the truth. The store manager also reached out personally, inviting him to return one day, not as a suspect but as a respected guest. The agent appreciated the gesture, though he wasn't sure he'd ever feel fully comfortable walking through those doors again. Still, he understood it wasn't about pride anymore. It was about closure. That night, as he sat quietly at home, he thought about how fragile reputations could be. A single accusation, even false, could tear apart years of work and trust. Yet what mattered most was staying calm, holding on to truth and letting facts speak louder than fear. He looked at the small evidence bag now sealed and stored, a reminder of that day in the store. It wasn't anger he felt anymore. It was something deeper, a sense of peace that came from knowing he hadn't let anger or panic control him. For a man who had spent years chasing justice for others, this experience had reminded him that no one, not even those sworn to protect the law, is immune to misunderstanding or human error. But he also learned that truth, when pursued with patience, always finds its way back to light, and so, even after all the chaos, he returned to work with a clearer mind, ready to serve again, not just as an agent, but as someone who understood what it felt like to be on the other side of suspicion